Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Tina. I just want to thank the committee. I was part of the committee, and then they threw my name in the hat, and I was like, no. These people hear too much from me. And it was just, it's an honor to ask to be speaking, but then having people that are your peers and you're doing work with ask you to speak, it was it really touched my heart. So I have a lot of nerves, and I apologize. I usually talk fast. I don't mean to. It's just I get passionate, like she said. And I remember sitting down with you guys because you guys have the hospitality that would not quit. They have these newcomers that make full meals and give them to you. It was such a great conference. Just to give you the stats, I'm always interested in people's stats. I love Brenda. She's amazing and gets you energetic, and she has so much emotion. I don't know if I'm going to cry or not. I almost started to cry at one point with her, but I actually fixed myself today and have makeup on, so I'm going to try not to cry. Okay, with that said, just a shout out to my sponsor, Polly P., who is celebrating her AA birthday today. Congratulations. And I'm sure there's other celebrants, and you're the people that keep me going and keep me active in the book and actively seeking different things. I'm a total seeker. And when I had talked with people that knew Bill W., they said that he was a seeker, and it always blessed my heart with that. My sobriety date is April 19th, 1984. I am 50 years old. I will be 51 in just a couple of weeks. Oh, did I really say that? Okay. I am here to talk to you about step 2. And let me tell you, I literally love step 2. It's one of my favorite things that I have gotten to learn over the years. And when I came in, I'm just going to give you a little background. When I came in, I literally was into worshiping Satan. I don't want to get into all of that, but I had been raised in a cult. And when I was raised in that cult, I had been in there since I was 2 years old. And the minister came to our house and excommunicated me from that particular parish. And when I was excommunicated, that same week, I was seeing a psychiatrist because I was out of control. And the psychiatrist actually kicked me out because I wouldn't stay sober. And then in addition to that, I was into devil worshiping. There was a gentleman down the street, and I'm the kind of person that if Brenda was talking about this lack of power, and that was my dilemma, and I needed power. I wanted it in every way, shape, or form. When I was drinking, when I was using men, when I was rubbing their legs, trying to get them excited to get what I wanted, I was the master manipulator. And I literally was looking for power in any way I could find. And what happened to me is that through my drinking career, which was short and impactful, but what happened was I started trying to go for anything that would make me feel different than the way I felt. And when alcohol wasn't cutting it to the best of its ability, or I couldn't get my hands on it since I was so young, we started this whole devil worshiping process. And I got kicked out of that same week. And the main guy had told me, Tina, we were about to do some seance. I know this sounds crazy, right? But this is my life. We're about to do some seance. And Chucky pulls me aside and he says, Tina, girl, I'm so sorry, baby, but there is something around you. And every time we have worship and you're here, it doesn't work. You're blocking us. And I thought, are you kidding me right now? Come on. I get kicked out of church. I get kicked out of Satan worshiping, and I was kicked out of my psychiatrist's office. So cold turkey, couple shots later, and a whole bunch of whatever pills I grabbed, I was feeling no pain. And I couldn't believe that I had been kicked out of Satan worshiping. Who does that? So you can imagine when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and if I was new and I heard a speaker like Brenda, no offense to Brenda, but if they were talking about God and worship and all this stuff, I would have hit the door. I would have been like, I'm out. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for the, sorry not to offend anybody, but I had 6 old farts that were in flannel shirts. I'm from Waukesha, Wisconsin. And at the time I was living in Germantown, and I went to Menominee Falls, and these guys were little old farts, and they literally said, Tina, you don't have to worry about that God stuff. What you have to worry about is that you need to find something that's bigger than you. And do you know what? I started working step 2 before I even knew what AA was all about. I got into Alcoholics Anonymous, and everybody was saying, hey, do you got a sponsor? You got a sponsor? You got a home group? You got this? You got that? You got this? And I'm like, no. And I'm the kind of girl, like, don't tell me what to do. Don't you dare tell me what to do. But somebody said, hey, do you got a this, that, the other thing? And I'm like, no. But where do you get one? For whatever reason, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, the very first spiritual experience I ever encountered, ever felt in my entire being is, 1, that I was safe, and 2, they loved, I smoked, and I was so young. And I loved that, and they encouraged it, and they would even buy me cigarettes, so that was even better. And then 3, they were all like this power, this energy that I had never felt before. And I was like, oh, and they said, you got a sponsor, you got a sponsor, you got a sponsor. And without even knowing what a sponsor was, I had no idea. I never even heard that word really, except for with NASCAR racing, because my dad watched that. I didn't know what a sponsor was. And I immediately wanted to get one. You feel me? Like, I literally had come to believe in something in this meeting, the very first time I ever walked in. I couldn't believe it. And I am not a joiner. I am not one to do the woman thing. Now I am. But in the beginning, I wasn't into all that. You guys were my competition, and I'm surely not going to like you. Not to mention that if you get to find out who I am, you're not going to like me either. So what happened to me is I was dry for a really long time, and I was trying to prove that if I stopped drinking, I was just a hard drinker and that I could go on with life. And eventually I ended up either going to shoot my brains out, drink, or leave the program, and that would be death for me. And instead I called one of those 6 guys from that club. They came and got me. I moved back home, and my parents said, you're going to be here for 1 year. You'll be here until you're 19 years old, and you're never going to return. And I'll tell you what, I was scared. I wouldn't tell you that. I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll get to it. And what happened is I went to a meeting. My mom said, you have to go to meetings, and you're going to have to get a home group. She was in Al-Anon, and thank God for that program. I went to a meeting that night. It was called the Monday Night Action Group, and they had a whole bunch of people greeting. You know how they greet, and they're like shaking your hand, and there was this big tall dude, and he's like, come here. And I was like, oh, hell no. And I got a sponsor that night, and she said, Tina, every day I want you to make your bed, and I want you to say the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer. And I was like, do you not understand that I'm about to blow my brains out, that I realized I'm actually alcoholic? And she's like, I want you to start with that. And I have not stopped making my bed since that time. Now, what does that have to do with step 2, right? Like this whole thought of how am I? See, I absolutely love Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, you can't fix the brain that is broken. See, I need exterior things to help me change my view. And when we're going through step 1, it overlaps with step 2 to start to create this bond for me. And I'll tell you, I had no conception except for the conception I walked in with. It's only normal. I can't just all of a sudden think of something different. Like, that doesn't happen for me anyway. Maybe for you guys, but I didn't know. And I love in our book that I get to qualify myself. It doesn't matter my age, that I got kicked out of church, that I was worshiping Satan. It doesn't matter about any of that. It said to me on page 44 of our book about agnostics. And I didn't even know what an agnostic was. I was like, what the heck does that mean? I can't be agnostic. I know there's a God, and he's punishing, and he's going to get me. He already kicked me out of church at my lowest. It said on page 44, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or 2, If when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. And I answered yes to both of those. And an agnostic was somebody who doesn't believe in the existence of God. He doesn't believe or not believe. Ag means without knowledge. And an atheist is one of those guys that doesn't believe at all. But an agnostic doesn't know either way. And I thought, oh, okay, well, then that applies, because I don't really know what this being is or what have you. I only know what I grew up with. And I told you, which is something I don't really talk about a whole lot, that I grew up in a cult. So I have a very solid, pushed into my brain thought of what I'm going to come to believe in. And later on, it says on that same page, it says, I'm going to be doomed to an alcoholic death, which is my first death threat, really, or live on a spiritual basis. And when I think about that, it's like so funny that normal people would hear that and be like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be doomed to death. But I looked at it and went, doomed to death or spiritual basis? What do you mean by spiritual? Because I'm not sure I'm all into that. Like, I literally didn't know if I wanted it or not. And then it goes on to say that I must find a spiritual basis, or it has a dash, like his thought is, or else. And or else means death. Like, you got to find this spiritual basis. And how do you get rid of the thoughts that are already created in my brain of this God that's like so crazy and punishing? And I only used foxhole prayers. You know, you've heard that before, where you're like, oh God, please get me out of this. Or I resolved to, I'm never going to do that again. And I didn't know what a God was. I had no idea. And everybody's like, you come to the meetings, you come to, and then you come to believe. And that's exactly how it happened, except for my first experience was I came to believe immediately. I believed that you guys had something different than I ever had felt. Now, going on, it says that this particular chapter, we agnostics, and notice it has a we in there. This particular chapter says to me that I'm going to be enabled to a power that's going to solve all my problems. That's bigger than me. Well, if you're a power seeker like me, I'm a true alcoholic. Lack of power is my dilemma. I'm always looking for power. And as Brenda was sharing, she did kind of step on too, because that's exactly when I become God and I start running the show. And when I start to run the show, man, I have problems, serious problems. So how am I going to find this power? And I know what they're talking about. And you know what I loved about Bill's story? When Bill gets sober in the beginning of his story, I don't know if you guys realize, but he literally doesn't want to call his higher power God. He says spirit of the universe, creative nature. He calls it a lot of things, but he has a prejudice that is huge against God. And in this particular chapter, there's a guy named Hank Parkhurst. Sorry, I'm such a history freak. Anyway, Hank Parkhurst was an agnostic, and he absolutely insisted that we have something in this book that would help the agnostic or the atheist. And I'm so grateful, because what came out of this is, as I started to read, it starts to tell me how I literally have an honest doubt and prejudice when walking in here. See, I cannot get rid of the God I was brought up with, because I have a preconceived thought, a preconceived whatever going on in here. And how do I get a God that I can understand entirely? I love Carl Jung. He's one of our great predecessors to Alcoholics Anonymous. And Carl Jung always said, God is anything the intellect is not. And I thought, wow, I love that. My God today, a thought that I have, and it has a voice, is my definition of God, my interior today. When I came in here, it was that punishing God, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. And in the book, that on page 45, right after step 1, and they tell us that this is not about a lack of faith, but it was about this acquisition of power. Well, that rang true to me. It had nothing to do with the God that I believed in. now I can get somewhere, because this was about a power that I was going to be able to find to help me when it's rough times. And I know the quarantine has been rough on people. It's been rough on everyone. And people want to hug each other. I had to school my parents yesterday. They came over. I'm like, what are you doing? They had their masks and their gloves, and they're like, we just came to pick something up. And you know, they just wanted to see me. So I love also, and I'm going to go into a little bit on one. In step one, they kind of give us the direction of how we're going to move forward. And he says, humility, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. I call it the how. Everybody forgets the humility part, but that's what Bill says is the essence of step one. Humility, honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness to move forward. And in step two, it starts to talk about from the how to the who. And I say that because I'm going to give you 3 page numbers. On page 25, it says at the bottom of page 25, there's a little asterisk, and it says fully explained in appendix 2. Then on page 27, it says for amplification, read appendix 2. And I'm like, wow, they really want us to read appendix 2, huh? Then when I get to we agnostics, and I have been through the entire front, and I'm 44 pages in, plus all of the doctor's opinions and the prefaces and all of that, explaining my illness, that it's a twofold illness. That one, when I drink, it triggers me to want to drink until I can't feel, to oblivion. And then it triggers an obsession of the mind. And that obsession of the mind can get triggered by anything, but I'm not going to go into that. So I have a twofold thing. And he says that a spiritual malady, a malady is a disorder. It's a disorder of the body. And everyone that goes to church has a spiritual malady. Everybody who's searching has a spiritual malady. That is not my problem. My problem is I'm alcoholic. And my spiritual malady is where I get confused and blocked and frustrated because I have old prejudices and I can't get rid of them. On page 47, he begs us to read appendix 2. And what's back there is the spiritual experience. And in that spiritual experience, it talked a lot about transformation. It talked about change. And how am I going to do that? And if Albert Einstein said, I can't fix the brain that broke it, how am I going to do that? Well, guess what? That's on the people I go to meetings with. So what started happening for me is on page 46, I love the We Agnostics too, because if you're going through the book, and the way I take the women through the book, I'm always pointing out the promises that he's giving to us. And he gives us a lot of promises before we even get to the real question of step 2. He gives us a promise and he says, but before I get this promise, he's really, really clear on page 46. He says, you have to lay aside prejudice. And he says it not once, not twice, but a multiple of times. Lay aside prejudice. And I'm like, God, I don't know how to do that. And he says, and express even a willingness to believe. Okay, well, I can do that. I can try to find something that's new for me, for Tina, not for Jacqueline D or Eleanor S or Christine. These are the people I'm seeing. So I'm calling you out. Sorry. Not for them, but for Tina. And what happened is he says right away, he says, we commence to get results. Well, that's a cool promise. I can handle that. I can handle to get commenced results, right? On our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. So when my sponsor said, start doing the 3rd step prayer and the 7th step prayer, I had no idea that I was already doing that. Okay, then Bill starts to go into his kind of conception of what a God really looks like. And like I said, he doesn't call it God. And at the end, he says, I'm going to call it God just for the sake so that you know what I'm talking about. But he uses a lot of words, and some of them are completely capitalized because that's the name of his God. He says creative intelligence, spirit of the universe, realm of spirit, supreme being. And he begs us to go back there, that we can get a spiritual experience in a variety of ways. You don't have to have a blinding white light to help you. And I thought, okay. And then he said, there's an assignment for me to do. And I thought, all right, I need to do this assignment. And on page 47, he says, then when, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. So as we move through the steps, he's not talking about the God that he understands. He's saying, get your God. And so what I started doing in the beginning, when I was very early in sobriety, I started going to meetings, and people with skin on told me my God. And somebody said, my God is funny. And I was like, yes, that's my God. Brenda is my God today. Somebody said, my God's sexy. And I'm like, yes, Brenda is my God today. And I started thinking about the things that are really important to me, that I find exquisite in people. And they said, do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean. And that's on page 47. And let me tell you, when somebody would say the word Jesus, the back of my hair would go up. I would be like, don't like her. If somebody would say, oh, Holy Spirit, don't like her. I had a lot of prejudices, you guys, and I was all messed up. I didn't know what was what, And so he says, if you do this thing with the whole spiritual terms deterring you, he says, afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which seemed entirely out of reach. You dig it? Like things that I never thought were going to happen to me, that I was going to believe or that I was going to feel is going to happen. And it doesn't matter like who I am. It matters what I'm doing. It doesn't matter if you go to church every month or every week or don't go at all. It matters what you're doing to find this God and lay aside prejudices. My dog is crying to get off the bed. He won't shut up. So now we get to the main point of, to me, step 2. He says, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. And this short question is a huge one for somebody like me. Do I now believe, or I'm even willing to believe, that there's a power greater than myself? And I was like, God, I don't know. This little booger is bugging. Sorry. I didn't know if I could believe, but I knew coming into the meeting and feeling that energy, those guys told me, Tina, you can use that energy anytime you want. Group of drunks means God. He's like, just use that. You don't have to go back to that old stuff. But I didn't know how to get rid of it. So I used that in the beginning. And obviously my God was limited. It had it was like almost in a coffee cup. And then I would go to, one of these beautiful conferences, and I'd hear somebody like Brenda, and I'd pour out the coffee cup and I'd put it in a box. And I'm like, okay, my God can have that too. And they give us a promise immediately on page 47. They're like, as soon as a man can say he does, believers even willing to believe, we empathetically assure him that he's on his way. And it's been repetitively proven that all among our fellowship, that effective spiritual structure can be built. And I'm like, holy cow. So right now I'm laying down a foundation, and 1 and 2 is my foundation. There is no way for me to get any further without that foundation being built. And I thought, okay. And he says, on faith. And then he begs me at the bottom of that page again. He's like begging me, please be sure to read Appendix 2 on spiritual experiences. Begging me, 3rd time, from the how to who. I thought, all right. He brings in step 1 a lot. He's like, faced with alcoholic destruction, we became open-minded on spiritual matters. And I thought, did I become open-minded? I was in ruin. And at the time I came in, I was at a complete surrender, and I was 4 years dry trying to just do the deal, and I didn't have any meat and potatoes. I went on frothy emotional thoughts and feelings. And if you said it in a meeting, I would copy you. I was a great copier, a mimicker, call me the parrot. And what happened was I started to try to lay aside prejudices. And he says on page 49, even against organized religion. Oh, shnikers, that's a big one. I had a real issue with that. So I had to do some work. And, they say when I did step 2, my sponsor said, Tina, now that you're telling God you're alcoholic every day, I want you to look for the God in people. And I thought, I don't know how to do that. And she didn't give me any direction. She said, look for the God in people. And I was like, okay. And then on top of that, I needed to write about these different prejudices that I had. And thank God for the following steps, because I was able to get some of that out. And to be real honest with you, that complete surrender when I was 4 years dry did not lead me to a spiritual bankruptcy that I had ever felt before. It took me a couple more years of using your God before I got that. And I could talk about step 2. I could talk about coming to believe, but I wasn't there yet. I read the book, Came to Believe. In the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous, they had a gentleman, there was an article in the Liberty magazine, and he talks about religion of or God of the variety experience. Oh, I'm messing that up. I know everybody's like rolling their eyes. Sorry, whatever it was. And I eventually come to a crash pretty hard at my tenure, and I didn't even want what I had in AA. I was sitting in a meeting, my arms were folded, my feet were out. I'm listening to the speaker I've heard before, and I thought, I could do better than them. Shut up. Just being cocksureness. Talk about cocky, and sassy as all can get up. And I didn't know I had so many prejudices that were so ingrained in me. I didn't know that. And I couldn't break that. And so what happened is my human frailties, right? My weakness and my character just kept coming out, and I kept getting these roadblocks. And eventually I had to take some different action. And so when I went through step 2 in a different light, I found out that there were reasons for my spiritual path. There were things that I wasn't understanding or reading. And I was all tied up on these old fixed ideas that I had. And I was so unwilling. I was just so unwilling to talk about that cult. And just recently, I'm 35 years sober, about to be 36 years sober. And I just recently did an inventory on that cult. And, you guys, I have not done my 5th step yet. It's so it's like that baby I don't want to let go of. Like, people won't understand. They're going to judge me for it. And I have all these superstitions. Like Bill says, I have all these superstitions, and I have these so-called small t traditions and fixed ideas that tie me all up, and I can't become exposed. And he says on page 51, he's like, and we asked ourselves this, are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as we were the ancients about the realm of the material? And he goes into this whole litany about how the Wright brothers got to fly and Kitty Hawk and all that stuff. And when I was reading it, I thought, oh my God, that's me. I had put these parameters on God. I started reading a book called Emmett Fox. It was a book that I guess Emmett is a huge contributor to Alcoholics Anonymous. And when we get over to page 53 in the big book, it gives us a proposition. And this is the huge one, besides asking if I'm willing. Okay, I'm willing, right? But I still have all these fixed ideas, and they get it. They get it in the book. Like, they're talking to me and he says, page 52, he's like, discard the old ideas for new. And what was happening to me is I couldn't discard them. I was living in the bedevilments. So right under there, he's like, we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. And I was like, oh boy. And he's like, 1, we're having trouble with personal relationships. That was me in AA. I had trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional nature. I either loved you or hated you, and you were going to know it. I wasn't faking it until I make it. If I didn't like you, I'd walk right past you. How unkind is that? That's not kindness, love, and tolerance. We were a prey to misery and depression. Oh my God, the misery and depression that's happening currently. People are tied up with them. I tell my girls, this is what I'm doing. I'm writing handwritten letters. I'm sending out letters to people to make them smile. Some of the people on this call got letters from me or something from me, a trinket. And if you're in my heart, you will be getting one too. And I had to get out of myself. I was so tied with self. He says we were a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to others. Now, bedevilment is this cause of confusion or doubt, troubles, torment. Oh my God, that's what I was living in. I couldn't believe. I was like, I never saw that before. I mean, I read it. I just didn't realize that I was that 10 years sober. And then he comes over to the bottom. He's like, it's either going to be self-sufficiency or God-sufficiency. What's it going to be? And I thought, oh my God, I have been all about these old ideas. I was, he says fettered, which means tied up. I was so fettered with this cult experience. And I used to pray before I would eat ham so that I didn't die or looked bad to God. I literally had terrible ideas of God. And he says, when we became alcoholics crushed by a self-imposed crisis, that was me. I was self-imposing the crisis. I couldn't get to the other people. And I absolutely love a pair of new glasses. Chuck Chamberlain is like all about uncover, discover, and discard. And one of the things he said is like, I have this circle and all the people are in it. And if I'm outside of it, I can't connect. And if I'm outside of it and I can't connect to God. And I was doing that. I was outside the circle of all these people doing AA, and I was sitting there judging them, and I had fixed ideas. And he said, if we had a self-imposed crisis, which I had going on, he said, and then he, could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition that God is everything or else he is nothing. Either God is or he isn't. What's my choice to be? And that's a daily choice, you guys. That's a daily choice that I have to make. Because when I get up in the morning, I am going to run the show. I am bossy, sassy, you name it. I got all that going on. And God loves that, but he wants me to use it the right way. He loves that I'm all those things, but he wants me to use it for him, not me. See, on page 62, which I'm sure the next speaker, who I love, is going to talk about, I am full of selfish and self-centeredness. That is my root trouble. And while I'm talking about all this prejudices and get rid of things, I didn't realize how tied up I was with old ideas. It's hard to get a new idea in there because the old idea is in there and it's taking up all the space. I love that second step proposition, but it's really hard to swallow if you don't have a God of your own understanding. And all these people at meetings were acting like they had this God of their own understanding. And I had a slight idea. I had mostly your God, but I didn't have one personal to me. And therein lies the trouble that I was having. It says on page 54, we worshiped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves. And I was like, yep, that was me. If I had the right stuff, if I had this, if I had the right guy, if I have the right house, if I have the right bedroom, I'll be okay. And what I didn't understand was that I was tied up with these crazy ideas. And on page 55, he gives me a solution that I can live with. A solution that will absolutely remove self-will going into God's will. I had to get rid of what was blocking me. I was blocked by all these old thoughts. He said, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Deep down inside of me, a thought with a voice is God talking to me. He said, I'm going to be obscured by calamity, which just means complete chaos. That's why I love in the beginning of this Corona thing, there was all this chaos and everybody's pulling together. And I'm like, hell yeah, these are my people, let's get it. And then all of a sudden he says, pomp, that's ego. Well, yeah, let me get in there. Right? I want to help. I want to be in there. And then, worship of other things. How many times did I think if I had this, I would feel, I don't know about you guys, but I did that a lot and it was painful because those things that were shiny become unshiny and it doesn't work. Okay, so I'm in the total problem. How do I get to that solution? How do I get to that point where I can have this new attitude and a new connection with God that I had never felt before? How do I get rid of that old and replace with new? Well, I started seeking and I read Emmett Fox, and Emmett Fox says there's 7 aspects of God. That's on page 11, Around the Year with Emmett Fox. And I love that book. I was like, 7 aspects of God. Now, if you know anything about Emmett, he's like this philosopher, a Christian philosopher on what they're saying. And then he takes it to all different areas. It's very thick and meaty. He's the guy that wrote Sermon on the Mount, if you've ever heard of that. That was Emmett. And Bill Wilson loved Emmett. If you ever go to Stepping Stones, they have tons of Emmett in there because Bill read Emmett all the time. If you start reading Emmett, you're going to find out like, oh my God, that we have that in the big book, But he said, there's 7 aspects of God. We can never put a human limitation on it because it'll always be a human limitation. He's unlimited. And I can't get my head around that, but I can get my head around the fact that he had taken a poll of all the different dialects, all the different Buddhism, Catholicism, you name it, he had asked. And there's 7 things that everyone agreed on. 7 things. And I thought, do I know what those are? What would I say about my God today? What are 7 things I know that everybody else would say too? Now, if you know anything about Emmett, he'll tell you what the 7 aspects are. And I'll tell you at the end, but you should take a second. I don't care if you're not listening. Take a second and think about the 7 things that are aspects of your God. Do you have a God that close? Because how are you going to unblock yourself? Alcohol was my solution of blocking everything. And then when I get sober, I have these scars and this stuff that's hanging out there. And I don't know how to get rid of that stuff. I have to start unblocking it somehow. So I have to start thinking of God in a different presence. That's why I started searching. So what are your 7 aspects of God? What are the 7 things you think about that he provides for you? So I had to break through that barrier. And I had to do a activity. Like I said, on page 47, I had to do that activity. And if you've never heard of the activity, I'm not going to say it out here because it's a very spiritual thing. And if you've never done it, you should get the full feeling afterwards, because he says, the consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. And that's a promise on page 55. And I could not believe that I, Tina, effing Tina from the Sticks, who nobody knows, would be able to connect with a God that I would understand, that I would have for me, not my mom's God from this freaking cult, not Chucky, the devil guy, not the philosopher that I was seeing. I, Tina, was going to have a voice inside of me that was going to help me along if I'm willing to get rid of some of that stuff. A lot of people act like step 2 is no big deal. And I thought, my God, came to believe, it's a process. He doesn't say we're going to believe because that's what happens. He says came to believe because it's going to be a process. And then I love it. He says, what is it? Wait, let me just find, where am I? I'm almost at, okay. He says came to believe that a power, and he capitalizes power because that's what he's calling his God, greater than ourselves could. Not that they will, not that they should, not that they are going to all the time restore me to sanity. And sanity, he defined on page 37. I see, I'm a I'm all about reading the directions and then applying. I loved what Brenda said. You have to apply it. Like if you go out and you get a new bookshelf from IKEA and it comes and all the pieces are there and you reread the directions, but you never assemble, you're never going to be able to put a book on that bookshelf. Like I want the bookshelf. I want to paint it. I want to put all my fun stuff on it. I have to apply it. So he's like, I could be returned to sanity. See, every time I start to think I know better, I go insane in a sense. And on page 37, he gives me the definition of insanity. He says, lack of proportion of the ability to think straight. What could we call it? Anything else? And I don't know about you, but when I call my sponsor and I'm all crazy up here, what does she do? She gives me proportion to understand. I have no ability by myself to figure that stuff out. I have to have a God that's willing to put me through another person, like hear the God in other people. I love it. He says, he said, God restored us all to our right minds. That was the promise of step 2. And that's on page 57. The 2 last paragraphs are all promises. And he says, he suddenly came to all who have honestly sought him. So if you're honestly seeking him, he will come. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. As I begin to see the truth, he's going to show me the way. The more I let go and come to believe that this power is here for me, this crazy drunk that wants to control everything. I read a book. I can't honestly remember the name of it, but if I remember, I will let you know. But he wrote the word. He said there's two things he gave me. He said spirituality refers to behaviors designed to free you from the delusion that your life can be controlled and the illusion that you're controlling it. That was the definition of spirituality, realizing that I'm not in control. And spiritual growth, he defined as an ever deepening capacity to embrace life with justice, compassion, curiosity, awe, wonder, serenity, humility. That's all of what Brenda was talking about. He gives us that, an ever deepening capacity. I had no capacity for any of those things, and especially love. And I got to tell you, I'm so grateful to sponsorship. The unconditional love that I get from my sponsor sometimes is the skin on my God. The unconditional love that I get from the women that I sponsor, like Fran, my little Fran who's on here. Fran wouldn't tell me she loved me for a long time. And the first time she said, I love you too, Tina, I cried afterwards. See, because that's God. That's God in my life, because I'm always seeking. I always want to be good for him. I always want to be there for him. You know, belief is a state of mind or habit in which you trust or confide in place in someone or something. And I have a belief in AA. I have a belief in my sponsor. I have a belief in my twisted sisters of sobriety. It's kind of like, I know, am I getting close to dead time? I don't know. What's the time? I have a couple more minutes. Yes. It's kind of like when you go to a new town or something, and I had driven in and I had car trouble. And so I called my girlfriend and I say, hey, I'm having this car trouble. And she said, hey, Tina, go to this car place right down the road from me. I use him all the time. And when I go there, I literally have the best service. He never takes advantage of women. I said, okay, thank you, Debbie. I got 15 more minutes. Good, because I have a couple of things I want to share with you that I don't want you to miss out on. And I went to that place and I got my car fixed, and she was right. I had a great experience. He was super kind, left there, went great. Now I have a belief in that place. So the next time I have car trouble and I'm around her, guess what? I'm not even going to call her, right? I'm just going to go to the place. Makes sense. Because now I went from having that belief to a faith because I experienced it. You dig me? Like, I don't have to call her, just like I don't have to call my sponsor to know that I should dress up and dress appropriate to speak. I have done this. I have a faith that I know how to behave appropriately for you guys. I have a faith in that. I just want to tell you a quick little story. When I did the assignment on step 2, where it talks about writing all the prejudices down, in the book, there's like maybe 23, 24 prejudices that he talks about. And he capitalizes the name, like presence of God, presence of infinite power and love, creator. And he told me that I'm going to step from a bridge to shore, meaning that I'm going to get off of this thing that's unstable to very solid footing if I do this work. And what happened is I did this work, and not only did I benefit from the God that I understand today, I actually carry that note around. I have all these words listed, and I wrote out the definitions. And when I did that exercise, I had gotten it from Clint H. tapes. I don't even know if he's still around or who he was or anything, but it was an assignment that I had heard from Clint H. And I had done it. And I went to my sponsor at the time and I said, hey, I did this work. Can I read it to you? Well, what happened, I love sponsees, right? Robin's sending me little hearts. I love you. My girlfriend Alexa is on. I love you. And people give me that love. And I had some sponsees that were really struggling. In fact, I just did it with Allie. I don't know if Allie O is on, but we just did her second step, and she had that spiritual experience that I had. And it's like this whole change of life, because no longer am I going on just your belief. I'm going on mine. And when it happened to me, I felt so empowered. You know, they say lack of power is our dilemma, and then he gives us the power back. And I never knew how to get that power. I wanted it so bad. I wanted to feel that so bad. And when I felt it after doing that exercise, I thought, my God, I'll never, ever again do step 2 in this very simple fashion. Every woman I sponsor has to go through this. And once I did it, I never felt more empowered in my entire life. I feel like during this crisis, like I have the best guy in my corner. He comes to me through hard times in my life. This last 6 months have been so hard, you guys, so hard. And everything that I've gone through, just a quick wrap up, and then I'll go back to the 7 aspects of God, so I don't leave you hanging on that. But I'm sitting, and I had just gotten back from Chicago. Chicago loves me. They asked me to speak. I love going to Chicago. I hope Tamara's on, my little lovely, beautiful woman. I texted my daughter. She's living with us right now. And I texted her. I said, where are you? And she said, at the hospital. And I'm like, why are you? She had twisted her knee. I thought she went to the hospital because she twisted her knee. And what ended up happening is I got home from Chicago, which is a 2.5 hour ride. And I walked in and I said, where's Desiree? And my husband said, oh, I don't know. And Carl was like, I don't know. And I thought, oh my God. And I ran upstairs and I changed out of my dress and I went up to the hospital. I was texting her and I said, we got to go. I knew, you know how God lets you know. And I went, and literally I get there and we find out that Desiree has cancer. I don't know what just happened. Are you guys there? Okay. We found out she had lymphoma cancer, and what she was feeling is that she had a huge mass on her chest that was hitting her esophagus, sitting on her lungs, and hitting her widowmaker. And I thought she was in there for a twisted knee. And I end up, because God has put me in a place of safe neutrality, I end up staying at that hospital for a week and having people love us and comfort us. In the same time, my bestie, Leah, I don't know if she's on, but her husband got brain cancer. And Leah's going from hospital to hospital as the best friend that she is. And he ends up passing away. And then one of my sponsees, Emily, who's doing the broadcasting today and helping us, her grandma kind of substituted my grandma. And anyway, she passes away. And I was like, this is too much. And then I went to Florida and we're hanging out. My buddy Danny said, come to Florida. So on December 28th, my husband and I headed out for Florida for a great vacation. And on January 18th, Danny died in front of me in a tragic accident, a motorcycle accident. And I rode alongside him. And I can't tell you that I handled it very well. I was screaming and yelling. I felt his spirit leave. And people were saying the things that they knew how to say, right? You'll get through this. I love you. Very kind things. But my heart, with everything that was going on, was really stressed. You know, it was broken. And when I feel like that, I don't know about you guys, I don't pick up the phone very easily. In fact, I like to sleep. And it took me a little bit. It's normal to feel sad. It's normal to feel stretched. And in all of that, I still got on my knees. And I wasn't at first. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm mad at you. I don't understand you. You said you would love me. And you're taking people, and I don't understand. And finally, I literally was like, okay, my husband and I were driving home from Florida, and we're in Tennessee. And I finally got on my knees because I was mad. I would talk to him every day, but I was mad. I didn't want to humble myself. I'm so sorry, you guys. I didn't know I was going to feel so emotional, but so I humbled myself, and my husband came over to the side of the bed at the hotel and like wrapped himself around me. And I said to George, I'm like, I can't. I'm so angry with God. I don't even know what to tell him except for that I'm an alcoholic, and thank you for letting me live through this. And he goes, yeah, sometimes that's the best we get. And I go, but I want more. I expect more from my God. I expect him to show me that Danny's okay. I sound like a petulant child. Sorry, like when we started. But that's how I was acting. And I got off my knees and I thought, whatever. You know, one of those moments, like, whatever. And I went downstairs and I was watching everybody get food. And they have that TV out there. And I turned and looked, and they were talking about CSI no, it isn't CSI. I always say it wrong. Whatever. It's a show I like to watch. And one of David Rossi is the main character in this show. And I really like him. I like his demeanor. He's so calm and smart, and somebody I want to be like. And I heard his voice, and I turn and look, and here is the very picture that Danny and I picked out for his office. The very picture. It's a weird picture. We got it at a like this antique shop or something. It's nothing I've ever seen before, ever. And David Rossi's voice, I know it. So I turn and look, and I hit George, and I go, oh my God, do you see? Do you see the picture? I'm like, holy cow. This is the very picture, because I was helping him decorate. Like, this was a big deal, this picture, you know? And there it is up on the TV, and it lasted. Like, George is like, oh my God. And I go, oh my God. And I had this like weird calmness, and I was like, Danny's okay. Like, he's trying to tell me he's okay. He's okay. Now, everybody has their own idea of a spiritual experience, but that was a huge one for me. And whether it was real or not, I don't know, but I know what I felt internally, that I felt calm. I felt the peace again. I felt like I was on the mend again. And that was all God. That had nothing to do with me. He always provides what I ask, even if I'm acting like a brat. So that was my last spiritual experience for this month, I guess, or lately. I've had many. I too don't like to let go of the banana. Brenda talked about putting her hand through a hole, and the banana is there, and that's the monkey. And sometimes I'm the monkey. And I do try very hard to stay connected. Okay, I'll leave you with this. 7 aspects of God. If you got a chance to take a moment and write it down, let me tell you what they are, because they're amazing. And if you love Emmett Fox like I do, he will go into great length on every day about each aspect. It's an aspect. It's a characteristic. The first one is life, truth, love, intelligence, soul, spirit, which I love. And the last one is principle. A principle, like gravity keeps you down, Water never runs the same direction. No matter what I do, God will always love me, and God will always love you, whatever God that is for you. He lives by principle. What a comforting thought. So here's my last little demonstration. I've done this before. I'm sure you've seen this, but pretend you have one of those power strips with all the different plugs in it. And you are going to set up a new computer. Now, back in the day, remember we had those big hard drives that were like these huge pieces, and you had to plug that in, and then you had to plug the monitor in, and then you had to plug in the mouse because nothing was wireless. And I used to take that strip and you'd plug everything in, and I had one plug open. And here's the end of the power strip. And I'm like, do I plug it into the bottom? No, everybody would laugh at me, right? I mean, you would be like, hey, you're having a moment. Like, that's not where we plug it. We plug it into a wall socket. I have to get power from something outside of me. So every time I pray and get on my knees, it's like taking that plug out and plugging into a wall socket, because I'm not the power, you guys. Whatever your God is. My God is right in here, and he loves you and he loves me. And I am all about practicing love and tolerance. I never had that before I plugged into him. See, I plugged into me and I was like, why isn't this working? George, why isn't this working? Somebody came over here. Somebody must have messed with this. Blame, right? The problem was I was plugged into the actual cord and nothing's going to turn on. No doubt. Duh. So I had to unplug and plug into a new power. And that's what I do daily. On my knees. I used to think, because I had that old idea that getting on my knees was cult-like. And I heard a speaker one time said that when I get on my knees, I know what I'm doing there. I know who I'm supposed to talk to. And it's a sign of humility. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so egocentric that I'm not willing to even be humble to the very person that's taken away this disease, that's allowed me to have relationships that I never had before, allowed me to be married for 25 years and get remarried to the same guy with my friends and family in Italy. Like, this is the same guy that allows me to have a relationship with a man that tortured me. I can have a little humility today.